Good evening everyone and welcome to WELGA's Facilitating Council Business webinar. My name is Tony Brown and I'm the Executive Manager of Governance and Organisational Services at WELGA. I'm joined this evening by James McGovern and Lynn Fogg from our governance team who will assist in answering your questions at the end of this webinar. I'm also joined by our e-learning coordinator, Cassie Phillips. In this presentation, we will discuss local government decision-making requirements and how governance structures can best support local government decision-making. For those participating in this webinar in real time on 9 May 2019, there will be an opportunity to ask questions which we will endeavour to answer at the end of this presentation. If viewing a recording of this webinar, you can forward your question to the email address shown on the last slide. Today's webinar will cover the following topics: governance, what is governance, local government governance, and local government decisions. The main session tonight is facilitating council business, where we will look at informal meetings versus formal meetings, concept forums and agenda briefings, council and committee meetings, and the benefits of informal and formal meetings. And we will look at influencing the strategic agenda for an elected member. Session 3 will look at efficient meetings equals effective decision making, where we look at meeting procedures, preparation and motions. Okay, session 1, governance. We all live as part of a community. Some of us live in large urban communities, others live in small rural communities. The well-being of our community relies on infrastructure, facilities, and a wide range of services that enable us to travel from A to B safely. Provides the parks we use to play in, participate in sport or exercise the dog, and the places we go to meet with friends or to have a game of indoor basketball, plus all the services that enrich our lives like libraries, festivals, community fairs, health, aged, youth and family services. The vital interface between community wellbeing and the infrastructure, facilities and services required to meet the community's aspirations is local government. The role of local government goes far beyond the old adage of roads, rates and rubbish. In fact, local government has never only provided roads, rates and rubbish. Local governments are responsible for making decisions that enrich the lives of those in their communities and have far-reaching effects for the communities of the future. Today's webinar will look at how facilitating council business through good governance and good government can support your local government in delivering the best outcomes for your community. Governance is how the local government goes about making decisions. It brings together compliance with legislation, policy decisions that influence how decisions are made in future, integrity and probity, following proper processes consistently, being transparent and accountable. You'll have heard the term good governance. Well, if governance is how we make decisions, then good governance is when we do this well. One of the most important roles of an elected member is to participate in the local government's decision-making processes. Councillors have a collective responsibility for making decisions at formal meetings about the wide range of infrastructure, facilities and service that make a real difference to the well-being of their communities. Elected members, as members of the council, have responsibility for determining and continually improving the local government governance structures. The governance structures in local government may be similar in that we all operate under the same legislation, but there is also scope for governance to be substantially different too. Local governments will have different meeting cycles for informal and formal meetings. They'll adopt different policies that guide decision-making and community engagement, and their communities will require different facilities and services. What is important, though, is that elected members ensure that their local government's governance is fit for purpose, as what served well 20 years ago is unlikely to be working well now. The structure of local government governance, and therefore how decisions are made, is crucial to the efficiency and sustainability of local government operations and community well-being now and into the future. Administrative law principles are the foundation for decision-making in public office, and the WA Integrity Coordination Group has collated these principles into the Integrity in Decision-Making framework. Power, the use of power responsibly and for its intended purpose. Principles, apply ethical, accountable and proportionality principles. Proper process, follow a proper and appropriate process. In respect to proportionate outcomes, you have evidence-based decisions, balanced and proportionate, and consider the consequences. There's a lot to consider in making local government decisions. So with the Integrity in Decision-Making framework, what are the considerations and influences for local government? In respect to power, you have the Local Government Act and other legislation. Principles, rules of conduct, conflict of interest, public accountability, relevant matters and not irrelevant matters. Proper process, we have informed decisions, procedural fairness, appeal and objection rights, and decisions communicated. In respect to proportionate outcomes, we have evidence-based, costs and benefits, balanced and proportionate, risks and consequences, and we learn from past decisions. Fundamental to local government decision-making is understanding the intent and roles assigned to local government in the Local Government Act. The function of local government is to provide for the good government of persons in its district. But what does this really mean? The Act enshrines the principle of general competency, but this must be exercised within the limits of the local government functions under written law and with the intent prescribed under the Local Government Act for local governments to provide better decision-making, greater community participation, greater accountability of local governments, and more efficient and effective local government. Further, the Act requires local government, when carrying out its functions, to use its best endeavours to meet the needs of the current and future generations through an integration of environmental protection, social advancement, and economic prosperity. So the meaning of providing good government is reliant on the council fulfilling its role as the local government's decision maker, which in turn is reliant on the good governance structures implemented and adhered to by the council, and how well the council fulfills the obligations under the Act highlighted here. So now that we've visited the intent and function of local government and the requirements for providing good government within a good governance framework, the role of the council perhaps takes on some deeper meaning. Governing the local government's affairs, being responsible for the performance of the local government's functions under law, overseeing the allocation of the local government's finances and resources, and determining the local government's policies. How well does your local government's governance support accountable decision-making within the principles of good government? Elected members working together as the council are responsible for setting the direction of the local government, and the direction-setting decisions are the strategic decisions that form the governance framework. In this slide, we've collated some examples of the types of strategic decisions aligned with the Integrity in Decision-Making framework. With respect to power, you have statutory policies, strategic policies, planning policies, community strategic plan, and the corporate business plan. your principal and services levels. Proportionate outcomes, we have the long-term financial plan, the procurement policy, budget, internal controls, and audit reports. When making decisions, the Council must consider each decision within the relevant governance influences, which will always include the community strategic plan, any relevant informing strategies, the agreed priorities within the corporate business plan, and the local government's financial and resource capacity. However, the community, and often very noisy parts of the community, will have expectations for the types of facilities and services they would like to have, and the Council is required to make the difficult decisions to achieve a balance between what the community available finances and resources now and into the future. The Local Government Act establishes essential but separate roles for the CEO and the Council that enable local government decision making. Section 5.41 of the Act prescribes the functions of the CEO, including the responsibility to advise the Council about the local government's functions under law and ensure advice and information is provided so that informed decisions can be made. Through the Act, relevant factors and do not take into account irrelevant factors are in the broad interests of the community now and into the future. Remembering too that this requires consideration of environmental protection, social advancement and economic prosperity, and the decisions are reasonable, fair and equitable. This dynamic between the advice provided by the administration and Council's decision through deliberative processes are public providing evidence that the CEO and the Council have fulfilled their obligations. The CEO's advice and guidance is evidenced in the officer report recorded in the minutes, and the Council's decision based upon that advice is similarly recorded, with the minutes required to be retained as a historical archival record. The Act also provides for transparency in this public record by requiring the Council to record in the minutes the reasons for when the Council decision differs from the officer recommendation provided in the report. Now for the main session tonight, facilitating Council business. This takes a closer look at how elected members working as part of the Council, along with the CEO, can design and utilise governance structures for meetings that will best support good government decision making. Broadly speaking, there are two types of local government meetings: informal meetings and formal meetings. Let's look at informal meetings first. Informal meetings are where the Council and the CEO, often with other executive or technical specialist employees, work collaboratively to exchange information and develop ideas. This is where the Council starts to develop innovations and strategic directions. It is where the seeds of the Council's strategic community leadership begin to take root. Informal meetings include opportunities for strategic planning workshops or concept forums, specific issue workshops. They can explore new ideas and build knowledge and understanding. Issues can be explored at a deeper level to develop concepts, new ideas, and new directions. Informal meetings can be used for team building and professional development purposes. They can also be used as forums for community consultation. Local governments also use informal meetings as agenda briefings, usually a few days before Council meetings, as a forum that enables elected members to ask questions and seek more information if necessary about the matters included in the council agenda. As with formal council meetings, the governance structures each local government establishes for its informal meetings are fundamental to how well informal meetings support good government. Informal meetings are not governed by the meeting requirements contained in the Act. It is therefore important for the Council to establish procedures that control the integrity of how informal meetings are conducted. Consider adopting a Council policy which records these protocols, which should reflect the following matters. Informal meetings are not decision-making meetings. They can only be used for information exchange and collaborative development of ideas that at some point in the future may form the basis of a report to Council. During an informal meeting, such as a concept forum, elected members have an opportunity to put forward their idea. The Council's discussions with the administration may arrive at a consensus view of a proposed direction. For example, the consensus may be that the proposed idea is not worth pursuing and the Council do not want staff to waste any time on that issue. However, if the consensus is to progress the issue, then it is then over to the administration to undertake research and due diligence investigations in order to present the outcomes, options, rationale and recommendations to a future Council meeting so that a formal decision can be made. In the case of agenda briefing forums, there is no debate, as elected members can only ask questions and the administration provide answers only regarding the reports included in the Council agenda. Agenda briefing forums provide the opportunity for elected members and the CEO to ensure that all necessary information is available so that the Council can make informed decisions at the Council meeting. Informal meetings also provide an opportunity for elected members and the CEO and relevant employees to have free-flowing interactions that provide the greatest opportunity of building a strong team environment and robust strategic planning and directions. This cannot occur if informal meetings only include discussions led by elected members. There must be opportunity for the agenda to be influenced by individual elected members, the Council and the administration. Despite the earlier statement that the Act does not apply to informal meetings, it is important for the probity and integrity of the local government's decision-making governance that the requirements for disclosure of interests apply to all informal meetings, including requirements for disclosures to be recorded and for those with conflicted interest to withdraw from participation in the relevant part of the meeting. Let's look at formal meetings. Formal meetings are prescribed in the Local Government Act and include committee meetings, ordinary council meetings and special council meetings. Formal meetings are the place where elected members come together as the Council to act as the governing body of the local government entity, as a formal meeting is the only place an elected member, when acting as part of the Council, and therefore the Council can make decisions. A decision made within a formal meeting, including committee decisions made using a delegated authority, are binding on the local government. The manner by which the Council conducts its meetings, including its debate and the ultimate decisions made, are evidence of how well the Council is applying the principles of good governance and therefore how well the Council is delivering on its obligations for providing good government to the people of the district. The conduct of formal meetings is required to comply with the requirements of the Local Government Act and the Meeting Procedures Local Law, sometimes also known as standing orders. This means that the meeting proceeds in a much more formal way, with the official titles used and debate conducted in a specific order, with limitations on when and how long you may speak. This formality requires elected members to invest in being prepared before the meeting, so that time is not unnecessarily wasted and the meeting can progress in an orderly manner so that decisions are made appropriately. A well-run meeting inspires community confidence. The Act requires meetings to be generally open to the public unless a part of the meeting deals with the matter that the Act prescribes as being confidential, and then the Council can decide whether or not the public can remain to hear debate on the confidential matter. If the Council seeks to allow the public to remain in the meeting, then before making such a decision, they should always seek advice from the CEO to ensure that there are no legal or legislative impediments in doing so. The Act also provides the public with the opportunity to ask questions at a council meeting, as well as at committee meetings where the committee has been given delegated authority by the council. Public questions can be about any matter relevant to the local government functions under law or the facilities and services provided by the local government. The Act requires elected members and employees who provide advice or reports to disclose and record conflicts of interest in the meeting minutes. And where the conflict of interest is an indirect or direct financial interest or a proximity interest, then the person disclosing the interest must be excluded from participation in that part of the meeting. Principles of probity and integrity are also served by the Council acting in a reasonable, unbiased and objective manner when making decisions. Here is an example of how a local government can establish a meeting cycle that includes a monthly informal strategic concept forum at which elected members can initiate items for discussion, and the administration can present information about new opportunities or information on progress for existing objectives. Agenda distribution. Note here that the Council agenda is distributed to elected members and made publicly available at least a week before the Council meeting, enabling time for elected members to read the reports and identify any questions or information requests they may have, plus providing opportunity for the community to also read the agenda and forward questions to elected members or the administration. The agenda briefing forum is then held at least a couple of days after the agenda has been distributed and at least a couple of days before the Council meeting. In this example, it's 1 week before the meeting. This is the informal meeting where elected members can ask questions about the reports and offer recommendations and seek any additional information they may require before they make a decision. Holding the agenda briefing a couple of days before the Council meeting also allows time for the administration to gather any information requested and provide it to elected members, allowing time for elected members to fully consider the implications. Then the Council meeting, which concludes the meeting cycle as the meeting in which the Council makes its decisions. The meeting cycle then begins again in the next month. Committee meetings can be scheduled on other days within the meeting cycle or before or after concept forum or agenda briefing. The timing of when the local government's informal and formal meetings are held is a matter to be considered and consulted between the council members and the administration. We recommend that councils revisit their meeting cycles following each local government elections, as new council members may have employment or other commitments that may influence when meetings can be held. There can be substantial benefits for local government decision making where a combination of both informal and formal meetings are used, providing a forum for elected members and staff to discuss and develop ideas and strategies. Elected members can review progress before a matter comes for decision. Strategy can be refined and fine-tuned. It encourages a team approach between the council and the administration. There's efficiency, so the administration has a clear understanding of the council's direction. Decisions less likely to be deferred or delayed. And there's options and opportunities where risks are better understood. Where committee and council meetings focus on decision making. What is the culture for working strategically at your local government? Do you encourage seeing the big picture requires the discipline of not making assumptions on the basis of expectation and perception. Thinking about component parts and their dependency on each other. What components do you need to create your own strategic direction? At concept forums, briefings and meetings, the Council should have a culture where elected members and officers listen to constructive mavericks or dissenters, avoid typecasting individuals, build on opportunities through concept forums to develop alternate scenarios, invite presentations from outsiders with different ideas, perspectives and information, and ensure there is adequate time available to evaluate issues before decisions need to be made. Influencing the strategic agenda. Each elected member has the opportunity to individually influence the local government's strategic agenda. By using the various opportunities provided within the local government's governance structure and by acting in ways that demonstrate they are working collaboratively, strategically, and as part of the council and administration team. Here are some examples of how and when an elected member can influence the strategic agenda. Actively contributing to innovation and creative ideas at informal meetings. Through the strategic community plan, corporate business plan, and informing strategies. Your annual budget, workshops and forums. Be prepared to participate in the meetings. And be prepared to influence others, and more importantly, be prepared to be influenced by others. And as an elected member, you can also put forward notice of motions. Okay, let's look at efficient meetings equal efficient decision making. Ever been to a meeting that was confusing or didn't follow an agenda, or you weren't quite sure what the objectives of the meeting was? Our communities expect that council meetings will be structured, orderly and efficient, and the resulting decisions will be clearly reasonable and capable of being implemented. In this next session, we'll look at how local governments can support efficient meetings that support effective decision making. Foundation of any meeting is the agenda. It sets out what is to be achieved at the meeting and provides the information necessary to ensure that decisions are well informed and comply with legal and legislative requirements. The agenda will include officer reports and recommendations, notices of motion, public question time, announcements, leave of absence applications, and confidential matters. And don't forget to follow your meeting procedures, local law. Most important. The Act requires the Shire President or Mayor to act as the presiding member for council meetings. The presiding member fulfills the most important role for the efficient and effective conduct of meetings and is required to chair the meeting and exercise control by ensuring meeting procedures are followed and member behaviour is appropriate. The presiding member ensures that the meeting comes to a decision in regard to each item of business by facilitating debate, calling for a vote at the conclusion of debate, and ensuring the decisions are recorded in the minutes. Councillors do not speak at the meeting unless recognised by the presiding member. The presiding member may join in the debate, but must follow the same procedures as everyone else. And finally, if there is an equality of votes, the presiding member must use a casting vote so the decision can be achieved. But the casting vote cannot be used to achieve an absolute majority. If there is an equality of votes for a matter that requires an absolute majority, then the motion will be recorded as lost, as the vote did not achieve an absolute majority. The presiding member may be seen as the person controlling the meeting, However, the presiding member is perhaps more accurately referred to as the servant of the meeting. The key skills of a good presiding member are: know how to use the rules, keep order and set the tone of the meeting, act as the servant of the meeting, be impartial, proceed the business through the meeting, use the casting vote if required, deal with points of order, deal with motions, and deal with amendments. The attendance of the CEO, executive, and technical and professional employees is necessary and vital for efficient and effective council meetings. Whilst the local government officers do not participate in the decision making, the presiding member and councillors should seek advice through the CEO where there is a question or where additional information is required before a decision can be made. Seeking advice through the CEO is also necessary where it is proposed to amend, defer, or adopt an alternative to the officer recommendation. The CEO's opinion should be obtained before a decision is made to ensure that advice can be provided regarding any legal, legislative, financial, or resource implications arising from the proposal. The CEO will often ensure that the executive staff, key technical staff, or staff with specialist knowledge relevant to the agenda items are in attendance at the meeting. So if the questions arise, the CEO can call on the staff with the necessary knowledge to provide council with the information it requires to be sufficiently informed to make a decision. You'll see from this diagram that the CEO and the minute taker are seated either side of the presiding member. This ensures that the CEO can provide the presiding member with advice about meeting procedures or the operation of the Local Government Act. And the minute taker can confirm to the presiding member is a decision or matter before the meeting has or has not been accurately recorded for the minutes. Sometimes the minute taker may even ask the presiding member to slow the meeting down or to check with the meeting to ensure details have been accurately recorded. Remember, it is the CEO's function under the Local Government Act to ensure that council is provided with advice about local government's obligations under law and to provide information so that informed decisions can be made. The Act requires the council meetings and meetings of committees that have been delegated authority from council to be open to the public, and members of the public will usually sit in an area set aside in the council chambers that is often referred to as the public gallery. The agenda will include an item at the beginning of the meeting for members of the public to ask questions that may relate to any matter relevant to the local government, not just the agenda of that meeting. The Act prescribes that the presiding member, or at the request of the presiding member, the CEO, are the only persons who may speak on behalf of the local government. Therefore, during the meeting, the presiding member and the CEO are responsible for providing answers in public question time, and councillors should never seek to intervene to answer public questions. The Act requires that questions asked during public question time and the answers provided are included in the minutes of the meeting. If, however, the presiding member and the CEO are unable to answer a public question, or if the response is likely to be detailed or require technical advice, then the presiding member may advise the member of the public that the question will be taken on notice, in which case the question is recorded in the minutes and the question and the answer will be recorded in the agenda and the minutes of the next meeting. Members of the public can only be excluded from the part of the meeting that deals with the matter which is prescribed as confidential under the Act. This requires the council to move a resolution often referred to as going behind closed doors, and such matters may include matters that affect an employee or employees, personal affairs of any person, contracts proposed or entered into by the local government and be discussed at the meeting, legal advice obtained by the local government, and a matter that, if disclosed, would reveal a trade secret or information of commercial value or the business, professional, commercial or financial affairs of a person. After the council has completed debate and made its decision behind closed doors, the council must move a resolution to reopen the meeting and the CEO will then invite members of the public to return to the meeting, at which point the presiding member or the CEO will read aloud the decision made behind closed doors. By reading the decision made behind closed doors aloud after the public returns to the meeting, the decision will be recorded in the meeting minutes, therefore complying with the requirements of the Local Government Act for all decisions to be recorded in the minutes. Most local governments have a meeting procedures local law, which dependent on your local government may also be called standing orders local law. As a local law, it is a law, and the council and committee meetings must be conducted in accordance with the requirements of this law. Some of the requirements include priority of speaking. The presiding member decides who is to speak. Speaking twice. Councillors can only speak in debate once per item unless exercising a right of reply. Time limit of speeches is usually 3 minutes. Speeches are to be relevant to the issue under debate. Lists the sequence in which speakers participate in debate. Balanced debate is achieved by the presiding member calling alternatively for those for and against the motion. Formal motions that affect the way the meeting proceeds are procedural motions. Turning up to a meeting and voting are perhaps the smallest part of an elected member's role. And for an elected member to fulfil their role effectively, they must invest sufficient time and energy in being prepared before each and every meeting. Each elected member should be familiar with the meeting procedures local law and the informal conventions and protocols used by your local government in meetings. Being well versed in your role and responsibility in the meetings means that you and your council can make the most of the meeting time to deal with the business of the meeting rather than managing behaviour and points of order. Reading the agenda and agenda attachments well before the meeting is vital. Ideally very soon after the agenda is received, as this ensures sufficient time to ask questions and seek additional information either at the agenda briefing forum or directly from the CEO. When reading the agenda, elected members should also begin to consider the points they wish to make during debate and record them, so that in the meeting they are able to construct a logical, effective and persuasive argument that supports them in influencing the outcome of the debate. This level of pre-meeting preparation also means you are free during the meeting to listen to other speakers and record points that they make and which you may either wish to speak to or rebut, or for meeting efficiency, look to avoid being repetitive if the point has already been well made. If elected members identify the potential for an amendment to the officer recommendation or an alternative motion, then this should be drafted up and consulted with the CEO and presiding member at the earliest opportunity before the meeting. Any legal, legislation or drafting concerns in the proposed motion can then be ironed out before the meeting, and the CEO can even assist you in drafting the proposed motion. Being prepared well before the meeting contributes to your council meetings being conducted in a smooth and efficient manner. The 4 ways that an officer recommendation may be dealt with include a motion to adopt the officer recommendation as written in the report, a motion to adopt the officer recommendation as written in the report but with minor changes, even if the original motion is to adopt the officer recommendation. A motion to amend can be moved at any time during debate, and if passed, the motion for the officer recommendation will be amended accordingly. A motion to adopt an alternative motion. This has the effect of rejecting the officer recommendation and is most likely to seek an outcome that is substantially different than what was proposed in the officer recommendation. If the alternative motion is passed, then the presiding member must ensure that the minutes of the meeting record the reasons for the decision being substantially different from the officer recommendation. A motion to defer the item. This motion is usually used when additional research or information is required before a decision can be made. In moving this motion, it is important that the motion includes the reason for deferral and the date when the report is expected to be resubmitted for Council's consideration. For example, I move that the report titled Review of Library Fees be deferred until the October Council meeting, subject to the CEO providing additional information on comparative library service fees for adjoining local government districts. Points of order. A point of order may be raised by any member in accordance with the meeting procedure local law. A member may object by way of point of order only to a breach of any of these local laws or any other written law. The point of order takes precedence and the meeting halts while the point of order is announced by the presiding member and dealt with. The presiding member is empowered to rule on a point of order. However, the Council may pass a procedural motion to overturn the presiding member's ruling. Knowing the standing orders and using them judiciously leads to effective meetings and efficient decision making. Procedural motions can be effective methods for dealing with matters arising or to move the meeting forward. For example, if the following procedural motions were passed at a meeting, that the debate be adjourned, would have the effect of a debate ceasing at that point and the debate on that matter being subsequently resumed at the exact same point in the order of the call of debate at another time or meeting. That the meeting now adjourn has the effect of the meeting ceasing at that point, with the minutes recording the date and time that the meeting stopped and the persons in attendance at that time. The meeting is then reconvened at another date or time, the same point in the meeting at which it was adjourned, with the meeting then continuing to complete the business left unattended in the agenda. That the motion now be put, debate immediately stops and the presiding member puts the motion to the vote. There's also procedural motions around that the ruling of the presiding member be disagreed with and that the Council meet behind closed doors. Foreshadowed motions are a useful tool where debate may be stalling and a member wishes to propose a different way forward. A foreshadowed motion has no effect unless the vote on the substantive motion is lost. The process for dealing with a foreshadowed motion would be that during debate, an elected member suggests that if the substantive motion is lost, they would like to foreshadow an alternative motion. The member may explain the relevance of their proposed foreshadowed motion as part of their contribution to debate. Then the presiding member advises the elected member that they have noted the foreshadowed motion. Debate continues on the substantive motion in the usual way. A vote is taken on the substantive motion. If the vote is lost, the presiding member calls on the elected member who proposed the foreshadowed motion, inviting them to now move their foreshadowed motion. The foreshadowed motion, once moved and seconded, becomes a substantive motion and is dealt with as normal. Voting is compulsory. A decision is made in the local government if a majority of the members vote for it. Most decisions are made by simple majority vote, that is, one more than half of the members present. But in certain circumstances, an absolute majority, one more than half of the number of officers of members of the Council, is required. The presiding member puts the issue to a vote, and when debate is concluded by calling for members to indicate whether they are for or against. We'll quickly look at debating tips. So the following are some handy hints for debating. Silence can be golden. Is debate necessary if councillors are in agreement? You can use the on-block opportunity to move items to a decision quickly and efficiently. Address the issue, not the person. Make your points first and then explain them, and avoid rhetoric. Respect. Respect is everything in a meeting. Elected members and officers use respectful language when referring to other councillors or employees. In council meetings, elected members are prohibited from commenting adversely on the character or actions of another councillor, or employees, or inputting any motive to a councillor or employee, or using offensive or objectionable expressions. Whilst you may be familiar with the protections of parliamentary privilege, which provides our state and federal politicians with legal immunity to civil or criminal actions done or statements made in the course of their legislative duty, no such immunity is provided to local government elected members. Instead, elected members have very limited defences available to them. So elected members must therefore make sure that they avoid statements which could be defamatory, libellous, or are not factual or lawful. Elected members are provided with protections for actions or omissions committed in the performance of a legal or moral duty that they properly exercise and free from malice. Notice of motion. A notice of motion is best used to initiate the CEO's preparation of a report for Council's future consideration. Elected members may use a notice of motion to obtain a council resolution for a new or topical idea to investigate. You have to follow the meeting procedure local law where the motion is to be stated so that it requires a report to be presented for Council's consideration. Caution if seeking to make a decision at that time. Okay, we're now at question time section of the webinar, so please use the question function on this webinar to ask a question, and we'll try and answer them as best we can. We'll have James McGovern and Lynn Fogg from our governance team, and they'll answer the question for you. Any questions we don't get to answer today will be posted on the WELG website and emailed out to all participants within 3 business days. Okay, we'll be with you in 1 minute.
Get some questions on Lynn's screen as well.
Okay, this is unmuted.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James McGovern.
Hi, I'm Lynn Fogg.
And we've got a few questions have come through from participants, and we'd like to provide some answers to you. So the first question we have is, with informal meetings, workshops, agenda briefings, do the principles of conflict of interest still apply, as in the case of formal meetings? And the answer to that question is yes. Section 5.67 of the Local Government Act states that a council member is not to preside at, participate in, be present, or vote on any matter in which they have an interest. Participate is crucial here, as it means a councillor cannot be involved in a matter in any way, not just matters dealt with at council meetings, and that includes matters discussed informally.
I have another question here, so thank you for sending them through. They're coming through thick and fast now. The question relates to, is an alternative motion different to a foreshadowed motion? And can this generally be moved in advance of the officer recommendation? So in terms of the first part of that question, yes, an alternative motion is different to a foreshadowed motion. An alternative motion would be put forward to the meeting in advance of the officer's recommendation. So would require the elected member who's proposing the alternative to be prepared prior to the meeting. That is, they've considered the alternative and have put forward a written proposal for an alternative motion to the CEO for the CEO to review and confirm that the motion is sound, as in there is no legal or financial or resource or risk ramifications arising from the alternative. Once the motion has been confirmed as in a reasonable form, then the Shire President or Mayor, as the presiding member, will be advised. And when the presiding member introduces that item of business, they will highlight to the meeting that in addition to the officer's recommendation, an alternative has been put forward. And then it would be over to the meeting to allow the alternate recommendation to be moved and considered. And if that alternate was lost, then the officer recommendation may come to the fore. A foreshadowed motion, however, would be during debate of the motion, which could be an alternate or the officer recommendation. Once that has been moved and seconded and under debate, a member comes up with a new idea for a way forward. So identifying through debate that there might be a different and better way forward. So during the debate, they'll flag that if the current motion is lost, I'm going to suggest that we move, and they'll put forward what the foreshadowed motion may be. The presiding member will note that motion, and the meeting will continue on with the substantive motion and bring that to a conclusion. If that substantive motion is lost, then the presiding member will provide the opportunity for the foreshadowed motion to be moved. The value of the foreshadowed motion is that it can redirect the debate, where at that point, the council can only see the current motion that it's considering it at that time. The foreshadowed motion can give them a new idea that changes the direction of the debate. Thank you.
The next question we have is, do you have any tips for managing poor behaviour of elected members during informal meetings not operating under standing orders? It's equally important that elected members follow the principles that are contained in standing orders, even though they don't have any effect at informal meetings, workshops or agenda briefings, and your cue should be taken from your code of conduct. The Code of Conduct talks about appropriate behaviours elected members must exhibit at all times while acting in office. This will become even more important when the Local Government Legislation Amendment Bill 2019 goes through Parliament, because some changes to the Codes of Conduct are included in that bill, including making the behaviours of elected members that are mentioned in Codes of Conduct matters that complaints may arise about.
Thanks, James. Another question here is speaking about the minutes of the meeting and the responses recorded in the minutes to questions from members of the public, and referring to whether or not a council member can question the content of the minutes and the officer's response to questions posed during the meeting and recorded in summary in the minutes. The answer would be that in council's consideration of the confirmation of the minutes, if there was a factual error that the CEO had confirmed was a factual error in the response, then at the time the minutes are confirmed, the council could confirm the minutes subject to that factual error being completed. But that would be the only case where the response provided to a question from the public could be amended.
The next question we have is, do questions from the gallery during public question time have to be recorded in the minutes word for word, or can questions be generalised but keeping the meaning and context of the question? And the answer to that is yes. It's not necessary to record the question word for word, but as close to the question as possible. It's notable that many local governments are now requesting the public to lodge questions before meetings, so the question can be clearly understood and a detailed response provided at the meeting.
Our next question is, do questions from the public during public question time have to be provided in writing? The answer is no. Any member of the public who attends a council meeting can be afforded the opportunity of asking a question directly to council, whether or not they have put that question in writing prior to the meeting. Some local governments encourage that protocol to assist their officers in preparing responses and as a method of providing the most robust response that they can possibly compile. However, it is not required.
Our next question is permission from the presiding member or CEO required for a notice of motion? How can assistance be obtained to prepare the notice of motion? The answer to the first part of the question is that it's not permission so much that is required for notice of motion, it is compliance with your standing orders that counts. The CEO and the presiding member will rule on whether a notice of motion complies with your standing orders, and we'll be looking for things such as the use of offensive or potentially defamatory commentary in the notice of motion, or a breach of law. In either of these circumstances and other things that are mentioned in your standing orders, the CEO and presiding member will inform the councillor that that notice of motion does not conform with the standing orders and is unacceptable. This goes on to the second question about receiving assistance. The CEO and the presiding member can then assist the elected member to prepare the notice of motion in a way that does conform with the standing orders. And these arrangements can be discussed between the elected members, CEOs and presidents and mayors prior to the meeting.
Our next question is, sorry, I've lost it. I've only recorded reasons for a change to an officer's recommendation when the officer's recommendation isn't moved and an alternative comes from the floor. If the officer's recommendation is moved and seconded, I simply rely on the rules of debate. Is this correct? The answer is, it depends on how substantially different from the original officer's recommendation, the amendment and that is subsequently moved makes the decision. If through a number of amendments or even a single amendment, the officer's recommendation is substantially amended, then yes, a reason should be recorded in the minutes. It is not just when an alternative is moved.
And this is our last question for the night. And just reminding everybody that all the questions and the answers provided this evening will appear on the webinar when it's finalised in writing, including answers to questions we haven't had a chance to get to this evening. So our last question is, how would you address a situation where the chair answers a question from a member of the public in public question time and the response they gave is incorrect or incomplete? There is an opportunity when the minutes have been prepared to add addendums to the answer that was given at the meeting to fill in the true nature of the most appropriate answer to the question. It's not necessary to request, for example, that the member of the public come back and ask the question again at another meeting. It can be taken care of through the preparation of the minutes.
Thanks, James and Lynn, and thank you for attending this webinar and providing your questions today. If you need any further advice or assistance regarding facilitating council business or any other governance matter, please do not hesitate to contact the Wellbe Governance team listed on the screen in front of you. For those of you watching this webinar after today, please send any questions you may have to the above email address. And lastly, if you have any topics that you think would make a great webinar, please let us know. Thank you and good evening.